Hello, and welcome to our fourth and final representation of the great episodes of 2024. During this zone of time, post-Christmas, pre-New Year's is often a phenomenal time for reflection and seeing, hey, how do things go? And what do I want the next year to be about? There's a little bit of often calm, maybe reduction in work volume, and an opportunity to do some of that reflection. And boy, an episode that I reflect back on frequently is with Jodi Wellman, talking about reflecting on the fact that our time on this earth is quite finite. And reflecting on that need not be morbid or spooky or terrifying, but rather inspiring to ignite a fire under us to do what it is you really believe in. And it's funny, I've got a buddy who, I mentioned this in the episode, he was reflecting on this very notion, started a company, got some funding, and that's just been going phenomenally well. And so I'm so proud of him. And it's cool what things pop up when you summon the courage to reflect upon just how much time you have left on this earth and just maybe what you want to go ahead and do with that. So now we represent to you episode 983, Making the Most of Your Limited Time Before Death with Jodi Wellman.
We all rationally know we have an expiry date. We don't know when it is, but we all understand it. But it's the reminder that we need to keep in mind and keep fresh. Life will pass us by. We know this full well. We need to start capturing some of these desires because otherwise they will float away and we'll get focused on the things that are sometimes important, but mostly urgent. Think about your legacy. How do you want to be described when you're long gone at your funeral? And that is the reverse way to engineer a life that you love and that you are proud to be living.
That's Jodi Wellman. She's a former corporate executive turned executive coach. She's also a trainer in the world-renowned Penn Resilience Program, and she's known for her inspirational TEDx Talk on how death can bring you back to life. Her work focuses on inspiring people to make the most of their remaining time by doing the things that bring you the most joy. So you'll learn 1, why you need to befriend the Grim Reaper, 2, how to feel astonishingly alive, and 3, how to break out of a rut. I'm Pete Mikaitis. This is How to Be Awesome at Your Job. And now, here's Jodi. Jodi, welcome.
Thank you for having me here. I'm excited.
I am excited too. I understand you say you'll have about 1,822-ish Mondays left. Any big plans here?
Well, I got to tell you, that number's down by 2 weeks since you read that.
Okay.
So I'm down to 1,820. That this clock is ticking down. And yeah, big plans. I mean, that's the point, right? It's like when we get a little bit granular with that math, that fabulous mortality math, it does make me and many others go, wait a sec, how am I going to spend that diminishing time?
Okay. So what are some of these big plans?
Well, they're usually bucketed. It's funny you ask that because in terms of research and then the way that I look at my life, they're in categories, right? So there are different domains of life. There's the fun and recreation side of things, which can further categorize into travel. So going to the south of France in the fall, that'll be exciting. And so that there's a whole category around recreation. What are we doing with our leisure time? And so looking at starting new hobbies, I'm going to be getting more into trying to learn a new language. And so really I'm looking to either refine French or Italian. So that's just one category. And so that's a good start, I think, lest I bore you with the gory details.
No, I appreciate that. That's fun. That's fun. Well, lay it on us. You've been researching our mortality. Your book, You Only Die Once, a compelling title. Any particularly surprising or fascinating discoveries you've made about us humans and our lives, our mortality, that professionals need to know?
Yeah, I definitely think so. So we all know in the work we do, for example, that, there's nothing better than the power of a deadline, right? It's like we will tend to procrastinate until we know that the strategy session is coming up on the 17th, or we've got a big project due at the end of the quarter, et cetera. And it's so true with our lives. So having this distinct and okay, fine, maybe a little bit morbid sense that we are finite is precisely the thing. By having that deadline that does kick us into gear to get on with, I say, the business of living. So it could be the things we do at work, all of the initiatives we might just keep postponing, but also the things we do outside of work, all the joys and things we might do, again, for recreation, socially, et cetera, that make us more well-rounded when we come back into work. So the research is called temporal scarcity. And it's this idea that whenever we have an asset, okay, like life, that we become heightenedly aware that it is temporary or rare. Our perception of its value goes through the roof. So that is why I get us to count our Mondays. And that is the heft in terms of empirical evidence behind how we do need to have, unfortunately, that rankling feeling of scarcity in order to take action and have that deadline. Or else we'll just float along the lazy river of life and have good intentions maybe, but not really take as much action on them.
Yeah, a deadline. And as quite literally here, there will be a day in which we die. A deadline.
You caught it.
The deadline.
Yeah.
And so morbid, yeah. I mean, that's how some people could react to it, but you seem to have a very different emotional energy, vibe association to this. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, I've never been super scared of it. I recognize in doing research, of course, and working with groups and individuals that some people would much rather not talk about death than anything, right? Many people would rather public speak. We're very afraid of dying in the discussion. So my openness to it and my mission in life really is to defang it, make it something that's like, yeah, it sucks. Yeah, definitely. Nobody wants to think about the fact that we're not going to be around much longer, relatively speaking. And so how do we use that and take a more amusing approach to accepting, yeah, sucks to be us. And yet let's use it pretty darn quickly to move over to the life side. So I talk about the Grim Reaper. I love it. I love the whole topic of mortality because I know it's a tool. It catapults us not to keep talking about death, but to talk about life. So I make the switch pretty darn quickly. It helps that I doodle the Grim Reaper and tombstones.
Okay.
It helps to lighten it a little bit. I tend to give out the most ridiculous, hilarious prizes in my when workshops, again, to create levity. But like a fact of life that we do a fabulous job of denying and deferring and avoiding. And I just say, guys, let's just accept it. Let's talk about it for a minute. Let's do the math. Let's do the thinking. And then use that and say, well, I'm curious, how does that motivate you to maybe spend your time differently? Because there's so much power there.
Well, so maybe could you give us an example of how a person walked through the math, they took a look at it, and then that transformed the way they approached their work, their life, what they're up to?
Yeah, I give so many examples in the book, and I do that because we do like to hear and learn vicariously through other people, right? So there's one leader I worked with who used to do, in the nature of his business, he acquired companies. And when he stopped and counted not just his Mondays left in life, but his Mondays left in his career, he didn't really have formal retirement plans, but he had a sense about, by this age, I want to be able to say no and say no a lot, unless it's a really cool project. So he did the math and he looked and said, okay, I do however many acquisitions, mergers, per year. And he did that and worked backwards and said, wait a sec. I've been thinking, deluding myself, because that's what we do. I mean, this is what psychology is. We just try to fool ourselves into happiness. We got to cope somehow. And so he was thinking, he knew he wasn't going to live forever or work forever. But when he did the math and he realized he really had 5 good deals ahead of him, really good, juicy ones that he loved to live for, it put everything else in perspective. And it helped him focus in on the kind of work he wanted to do, the kind of deals he wanted to negotiate, the kind of team he wanted along the way, because he was just dilly-dallying and having people around him that weren't necessarily the lifers, as he now called them. And so it helped him prioritize, what kind of work do I want to do? What kind of work do I not want to do? Because we all know sometimes that's where the meat on the bone is. So it can really help sharpen what our priorities are, just by way of one example.
Okay. So then for our math, can you walk us through it? How might we compute that? Do I need to whip out an actuarial table or what's the sequence by which I arrive at my Mondays left?
Right. It's a lot easier than you think. Now, the good news is I have a page on my website called Resources that does the math for you if you don't want to waste your precious time in life doing math, but it's pretty easy. So if you identify as male, start with 78 years. That's the average life expectancy. And then you minus your age, and then you multiply by 52 just to keep it easy. Now, if you are a little more fortunate to have been born a female and you identify as such, then your average age is 83. And then you minus your current age and you multiply by 52 weeks a year. And then if you don't identify with either, just average it at 80 and minus your age. And again, multiply by 52. And I think, you could probably add in a few Mondays just because you listened to How to Be Awesome at Your Job. I mean, I do think that should buy you.
That's true. Life extending.
It is. It is. At least a couple of weeks, right?
Life giving. Okay. And so then when you see that number, it's like, well, shucks, here we are. We're maybe 1,000-ish, 2,000-ish. And then it's even more real. It's even more real when we get precise, like 1,822, like you had there. And so you see that. And then what's most people's reaction to beholding this figure?
Yeah. It is usually a bit eye-opening, like literally eyes widening, right? Like because we are used to the language of years. We've already rationalized. Yeah, I'm going to live to about 80. My grandma lived to 90. Oh, shoot, but my Uncle Reg died at 71. And you average it out somewhere. But when we talk about the weeks, and I'm super nerdy because that's why I call my company 4,000 Mondays. When you even think of it in terms of Mondays, which have a very different feeling than a Friday. Fridays are slam dunks, like life's easy. But when you think about it with a Monday and you quantify and say, am I really doing the stuff that lights me up if I'm going to be waking up for just that many more Mondays? That's where it creates the eye-opening and wake-up call that I'm looking for people. So it does tend to create enough discomfort. I'm not afraid of the discomfort. I want people to feel just enough of the poke in the ribs to feel like, I got to get on with this. And this is the thing, Pete, and you know this from all the work you do and the research you do. And with me, with my positive psychology background, I would love the idea that we could all just be motivated enough by the pursuit of something awesome. I want to live this kind of life and I'm going to go for it. And some people are intrinsically motivated enough to do that. But the rest of us, we need a prod, we need a nudge, we need something that is unfortunately just a tad negative, which is why I talk about scarcity rather than abundance in this context. And so that is the eye opener for people that they think, oh, didn't want to see it that way. But now that I see it and I hopefully can't unsee it, what does it motivate me to do? And that's where the conversation gets good. It's like, so now what? This precious life, this dwindling, diminishing existence you have. What do you want to, gotta throw that in. I mean, you gotta heighten the drama, but what do you want to stuff it with?
Well, Jodi, this might be the most intense episode of How to Be Awesome at Your Job ever. It's like quite literally life and death is all we're talking about. And what you say really does connect. A friend of mine shared with me, he had some family members with some health challenges. One was a child of his, which is very scary. And then another was his mother. And he said, boy, just experiencing that really kind of made me think about what I want to be doing with my career instead of like postponing my dreams. And so he just like went for it. It's like, I've always had this cool business idea. And so I got some people together. We made a pitch deck and we approached an investor. And then he's in for a couple $100,000 or a few $100,000 for a few points of equity. And so he's got like a multi-million-dollar valuation. It was like, I just talked to you like a month ago. What is going on here? It's amazing. And so I'm proud and impressed. And just like that, he had the idea bouncing around his head for a long time. And then a few scary situations with family members' health got us, you know what, let's just see what happens. Let's just go for it. And then wow, he's off to the races.
Oh, this story is profound. And I love, this is the research I do that just lights me up beyond belief that I hope to also shine that light on others. This is the wake up call with this gentleman, right? And it takes a really unfortunate situation to see that light, especially because I talk a lot about the wake up calls we receive personally. Like if you get a health diagnosis that ain't so hot, that usually tends to snap us to attention and we want to live differently. And research is so clear. I always love this phrase that existential psychologists use, that when people have had a brush with death, they experience what's called a roar of awakening. It feels so visceral, right? And so whether it's our own precipice moment with the great beyond, or whether it is because a family member or a dear friend, or we've had some very salient moment to realize, oh gosh, we are mortal, that can be the thing that catapults us. And ultimately what it comes down to, and I think you even embedded the words in your anecdote, it's like, what are we waiting for? We delude ourselves into thinking that we're going to have time later. And I am getting to get all hot and bothered here, but like we need to talk about it because I think we believe we're going to have time to do the new initiative or open up the New York office or do the cool thing or open up the spin-off business or go to Prague. We're going to just do it later. It's either in this category of when work dies down, well, like, let's all laugh together at that notion. Because like we're working hard at making work more productive and busier often, which is not about dying things down. Another metaphor about dying things down. And so we're either waiting for that lull, what ain't going to happen, or we're waiting for retirement, which to me is like, don't you dare. Yeah, plan a cool retirement, do that too. But if you are deferring your existence for a later that just may not arrive, oh, honey buddy, I just want to take you and somewhere between a hug and a throttle. It's just like, what are we waiting for? Don't wait for your kid to get sick. Don't wait for you to get thankfully in remission from a cancer that you just were trying not to think about. Don't wait to get to retirement when all of a sudden your gout is so bad that you can't even climb the Spanish steps that you've been longing to climb since you were in your early 30s that you just put off. See, I'm getting all worked up, Pete.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Well, it's heavy and it's intense. And in some ways, you've got something novel on your hands. You got the math and the number of Mondays and whatnot. In another way, this is a very ancient wisdom concept. Memento mori. I think that's Latin. I was a Latin student.
Latin.
That just means remember your death. Is that correct? The translation?
Yeah, remember, you're going to die. Yeah.
Remember your death. And so I know Ryan Holiday's done a fine job of, I think he's got a cool coin as well over that says that on it. I think there's a skull or something. Cool stuff from Ryan Holiday. So tell us, what's sort of like the ancient wisdom on meditating upon this? And what's your new fresh stuff that you're bringing to the table?
Yeah, it's all rooted in the ideology that some call it Stoicism as a philosophical endeavor. Philosophers, depending on their camps, for centuries have been extolling the virtues of remembering that you're going to die. And in some cases, it was so that they could control the population for ways of being virtuous or for religious means. But being in tune with the end is not a new idea. Just like with most of us, we all rationally know we have an expiry date. We don't know when it is, but we all understand it. But it's the reminder that we need to keep in mind and keep fresh. So in more modern times, I referred a moment ago to some existential psychologists, and there's a whole new branch of psychology called existential psychology. And it really is the study of our experience of not just the positive psychology side, which is a lot of my background around like what it takes to live the good life, but it's also the nuances of how we will defer and avoid and deny and what the cost is of that. So the more modern take on it is, let's just try to be open and honest with ourselves about it and have conversations with our families and our friends. And just like, for me, it's like, that's the best happy hour ever, is just talking about a bucket list and holding each other accountable about what are you going to do? Did you book the trip? Did you book the online course? Did you set up the LLC like you said you wanted to do? Because again, what are we waiting for? So it's all rooted in the ancient times. And in the modern times, I think there's not really a lot more we can do other than create a habit around talking about it and thinking about it and remembering it. So this doesn't just become a, interesting conversation I listened to on your podcast that, floats away. We have to embed it into our routines, if you will. And that's the stuff that helps make it stickier.
Could you give us another example? So we've heard about a couple folks in the deal making or entrepreneurial zone. Any other dramatic wake-ups that you've witnessed?
Yeah. There was a woman I worked with 3 years ago. She was in her early 40s and she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she ran her own company and was an eye-opener for her. She beat it, and that was fantastic. And that had inspired her to come alive and start a foundation as part of her organization. So a lot of what this does is it instills this idea about like legacy thinking, which is really important, I think, for leaders, but not even just for leaders, but people thinking about how am I showing up at work and how am I showing up at life? Like, how do I want to be remembered? So for this woman, Christia, she felt really compelled as a result of having her life threatened in front of her to say, I want to start raising money for women with breast cancer who didn't have access to some of the means that I had, because she knew coming from the south side of Chicago that she had a history where she knew other people were suffering in ways that her financial means allowed her, better access to some care and convenience. So now the truth is, if I was just to fast forward to take this to a different direction, but on purpose, is that she was re-diagnosed. And unfortunately, a couple of years ago, she did pass away, and she was 42 when she died. And I still work with the company, the fabulous team there that inherited the business from her. Her sister and her niece are running that company. They're called Thank God It's Natural. And they're phenomenal. But for Christia, it opened her eyes up to What kind of business do I want to run? Where do I want to prioritize our operations? And where do I want to not focus? So another woman that here in Palm Springs, where I'm currently based, also had a breast cancer experience for herself. She started a nonprofit that helps survivors. And the way she worded it is that I was given a second chance at life. And she said that in her experience of sitting and doing something like 24 rounds of chemotherapy, I wrote about this. It's an example in the book and drew a doodle about it. I called it Shay's Circle because she said, I took a fresh journal page and I drew a big circle. And I said to myself, I'm making it through this cancer situation, but I want to be very thoughtful about the life I'm going to live moving forward, this second chance I've been given. What do I want and who do I want in my life? And she was very deliberate and wrote names of people, some of the priorities with her work, activities she wanted to focus on, things with her kids in the circle. And she was very thoughtful about, and I will no longer, and she had a couple names and she had a couple of tendencies, like pleasing tendencies, saying yes to being on committees and all the things that we just do because we're not conscious that our life is finite. So those are extremes, people having had scares that did unfortunately take them, but also scares that did, I think we learned from that. Like my goal is for us to have wake-up calls without having to go through any of that drama of having a near-death experience, because there's so much gold from people who have been there or have been close. So we can refine our priorities. I think that's one of the biggest opportunities. And in addition to being grateful for life, but refining our priorities in the big businesses we work in and things we do, sometimes that's key.
It's fascinating as I just imagine the listeners hearing this. Like some people have already turned off this podcast and like have asked out their dream guy, their dream partner, or send an email to be like, let's talk about this business that we've been kicking around. They've already taken the action. They're so fired up. They're inspired. Like you're transforming them. Boom, already done. And I think there's others. I'm finding myself in this boat a little bit right now. It's like,
yeah,
well, Jodi, I guess I've been quite blessed. In many ways, I've had a lot of dreams and then I have realized them. It's like I've got a family and they're amazing. I had a dream job and then I got a job that was better than that dream job. And then I got a job that was better than that dream job. It's like I'm talking to fascinating people that whose books I would just read. And this is turning into income. And then other entrepreneurial things are turning into income. And I'm working with cool people I like. It's sort of like, in a way, it's like, I don't feel like I've postponed anything major. And yet I have a feeling there's more for me here because I don't, frankly, spend much time thinking, oh, I'm going to die soon.
Yes.
I just don't do that. And as you're saying it, it feels heavy and intense. Like, yeah, whoa, for real, limited number of Mondays. Okay. But I'm not yet electrified to charge in any given direction. I was like, things are pretty good. I guess I should just keep doing that. What about this segment?
Yeah, I love what you're saying. So I have quadrants, right? Like any good empirically based situation has quadrants. And so you are in...
I'm a former consultant. Absolutely, they do.
Exactly. You got the vein in you, right? So you've got widening your life with vitality is one dimension. And that's literally the idea about like, how can I add more fun and interest and experience and cool stuff and pleasure and happiness? Okay. So for many people who have really busy, profound jobs, this is a dimension. And in fact, this actually is where most people in my research will identify is they'll say, I've got enough meaning in my life, but I need more of this widening vitality. I need more fun. Like, I feel like I'm not going out as much as I used to do the fun things in the restaurants or going to a concert or trying that new printmaking class or the things that might feel kind of cool and make me feel more alive in a different way rather than maybe the more one-dimensional existence I've been living, which is like rocking my business. So that's just one axis is widening your life with vitality. The other one is deepening your life with meaning. And that is that sense of having a purpose, being connected to people, maybe something bigger than you, like in the spiritual realm. It's defined as kind of doing good as opposed to just feeling good. And so when you mash these together, you've got 4 quadrants, right? You are in what I call the astonishingly alive category.
Oh, wow.
Which I know it's a big word. I know. But here's the deal. Because why this is that you seem to be, you're living a good life where you're plus anywhere positive, even if it's 0.10 on meaning and plus on vitality. And so you're in a good place. There are a lot of people out there, a majority, because by the way, my research is clear that like 11% of people identify in the astonishingly alive category currently. And so most people are in that zone of like, my job's meaningful or my rearing my kids is meaningful, but I'm so freaking bored. Or it could be the reverse, which is am having fun. I'm out there. I am traveling. I'm on the yacht, but I go home and I feel like I'm an empty, hollow shell. Like, what am I doing this for? So there are variations on those themes, but I don't want to say now that there's no fun for you, that you can't do more with this. No, exactly. Cash in your chips. No, because, here's why. This is why you do this podcast. You're in a good situation. You're living life and you are yearning to learn more. You want more. So nobody I know who's in the astonishingly live category is just content to put your feet up and be like, we are done here. You want more. And so that is where I do think some of these exercises can be useful. So for you, counting your Mondays may not be resonant in a way that you're like, no, but I've done cool things. That's what we're looking to get to, is that feeling like, quote unquote, I killed it. Like if you got to the end, you'd be able to say,
so much death, Jodi. Like you're going to die.
That's where you're at. Like, okay, fine. I nailed it. Like I lived this life. I extracted it. I did it. You might be able to say that now. And yet there are also things where if you did play the game with me about the deathbed regrets, or if you knew you had 18 months to live, what would be things that you would all of a sudden think, oh, I want to do that? Those are all just cues and clues to either yearnings or inklings that you might want to get moving on now. And I call them pregrets. I know it's super cheesy, but like if you identify a regret might be like, oh man, I always wish that I had volunteered at the library, or I always wish that I had gotten back to playing the violin, or fill in the blanks. There's no shortage of examples. That's an example of like, hey, the good news is, last I checked, you still have a pulse. And if you really want to pick up the violin again, like, dude, it's yours to pick up. And then you just get to be the one to decide like, it was a passing fancy, no big deal. My life is great without doing that. Or, yeah, I would feel proud of myself if I actually did pick that up, or go and read to kids from 4 till 5, Tuesday evenings, whatever it is. Those are opportunities, I think, to just add even more astonishment to your astonishingly alive life.
That's really cool. And I like that notion a lot in terms of with the two axes. I'm thinking of a buddy who he was doing a lot of cool things. Like, yeah, he's in a drumming in a band. He's, like brewing beer and going to beer tasting events and golfing and improving his golf. And then his mom said, this is like a very mother thing to say. He's like, those hobbies aren't really a vocation. I was like, oh, that's heavy, vocation. But yeah, that sort of speaks to meaning. And there's some truth to that. Like all the fun and games with these activities can leave you feeling hollow. Or you might say, no, I've got the dream family, but oh my gosh, when do I get out of this home and just be wacky? Yeah, so 2 dimensions. Yeah, you can widen, have more fun, widening vitality, but you might feel hollow. Or you could be super fulfilled, but where's the fun? And that does remind me, I guess the things that are sort of left undone, I mean, some of them I'm just sort of pursuing, like, wouldn't it be kind of cool to be lighter and stronger at 41 than I was at 21? Well, I'm on my path, and I think we're getting there, and it's sort of exciting to feel the progress from like a fitness perspective. But then there's also things that just sort of got left by the wayside. Like, I always thought it would be cool to learn how to sing, and I've never really done that very well. Or I've always been mystified by when I go bowling, which is rare, like one throw of the ball is a strike, the next is a gutter ball. And I don't think I did anything different. Like, what's behind that? Like, I've thought it would be fun to spend a day with a bowling coach for no reason, just to solve this plaguing mystery, though I may only go bowling 3 times a year for the rest of my life. And it doesn't matter if I win or lose, to me in the least.
Right. This is the cool thing. You are giving examples that I think we in our rational brains think, but this isn't really a thing, is it?
Yeah, that doesn't really matter.
And we can call it corny. And that's one of the things I notice actually in the workshops and work I do, is that people will feel the need to kind of explain away or say, I don't even know why I want to do this, but I do. And it's like, we just have judgments about things. And I'm here to say, there's nothing that is too small or silly, because when you look at the span of your life, and remember, I'm the one that gets fanatical about calculating time, usually calculating it backwards, but every single moment of our lives is a little tiny fragment, whether it's a 5-minute or a 10-minute or a bowling excursion or going out for Thai food or spending time in a meaningful conversation with a colleague. They're all just 30 minutes attached to each other. And so in our lives, we underestimate that if I was to take, hey, what if I did book a bowling guru session? Like, first of all, that sounds to me like it would be hilarious. And I'm always a big fan of having a good story to tell later. But like, that could be a thing where it's a fun thing. Now, this is an example you could probably whip up. And this is what I do in workshops with people. It's like, get your list going. The things you might come up with first may not make your cut, right? Or they may find it interesting today. And then tomorrow when you're seeing the light of day or you've ranked ordered other things, you think, oh, nah, you know what? I don't really need to go to the Florida Keys, whatever. But at some point when you have a working list, it gives you the actual solid chance to make choices about your life. Because right now, in the absence of having something that's concrete, your list of things that bring you joy, your list of things that would be cool to do, that again, I like to organize them on those axes, right? About fun stuff, deep stuff, vitality, meaning. But now at least you have a menu to choose from about how to design your life. And life will pass us by. We know this full well. We get to the weekend and, well, first of all, we're always glad it's the weekend. But we get through our weeks and they feel like blurs. It's a very strong signal that we aren't doing anything that's unique or different with our time. And in order to even just create the perception of time slowing down so that your 1,822 or however many Mondays you have left are well spent, it's about being super conscious and saying, you know what? I'm going to book that bowling lesson. Or you know what? I am going to go and plan that road trip that I've been talking about for ages. Or I am going to finally schedule that team retreat that I've been dreaming about, but am I an all talk, no action kind of person? No. I'm going to just book it because it's on my list. And I've said, this is something that I would feel really cool if I did. Would I regret it gravely? On my deathbed? Maybe, maybe not. But the point is, we need to start capturing some of these desires because otherwise they will float away and we'll get focused on the things that are sometimes important, but mostly urgent, Cubby style. And the next thing you know, it's 3 years later and we're not any younger. So this is just really about getting deliberate with what it might take to make a life worth living.
Yeah. And Jodi, I think as folks go through this exercise, they could have moments of inspiration, like, yeah, these are all the cool things I'd love to do. And then disillusionment in terms of oh, but I got to pay the bills and, we got the mortgage and, the kids
Totally.
need these things and I can't just abandon my duties and responsibilities. So we get excited and then there's a dose of reality and practicality that's like, wah, wah. So how do we deal with those?
I am fanatical about making sure that at least do a list of 30 things, 25 at least have to be things that are very doable in a day or a week. So it needs to be within your resource plan. It can't be, oh, what makes me really happy is when I am sailing around the Mediterranean. Yeah, you and everybody, but that's not going to be likely. I'm looking for things that are actually very, very bite-sized on your list. For many people, it's that they go for a walk on a Saturday morning in the forest preserve. Last I checked, that was free. Okay, maybe you have to pay for parking. I don't know, but we're talking $5. And sometimes I know busy parents are like, dude, when was the last time you had a Saturday morning free? But I would still challenge you and say, do you have 35 minutes to go and sneak that into your day? Identifying things that give you, again, small little bouts of joy. For some people, it's as simple as, I'm looking right now, of course, at a book. And this comes up a lot when I work with professionals. We read a lot of business books. As we should. They're amazing. Lots of cool ones. Lots of great self-development books. And yet, it is a real source of almost guilt, but joy about people saying, I would just love to read a fiction book for a change. Or I would love to, read a biography, just something kind of mind expanding. And that is an example where, what if you read a chapter in the morning over coffee and your piece of peanut butter toast? And you just shook up your routine a little bit, because we haven't even talked about novelty, but having variety in our life is one of the lowest hanging fruit options out there to shake up our lives and add just a little bit more, again, of that vitality, because we just get into routines. And we've been trained by lots of really smart thought leaders that habits and routines are the way. And I'm going to challenge that, because I think that it is because we get into the rut. And one of my favorite quotes is by Ellen Glasgow: the only difference between a rut and a grave are the dimensions. We will routinize our lives to the point where they've lost sort of the flavor. It just becomes, I know what I do on Tuesday mornings. I go into the office, I nod at Marcy, I get my coffee, I do the report, I have the status update meeting at 2 p.m., and then I go home, shaking things up, even in ways that we will, again, underestimate the value of. Going outside, I just heard from somebody that was at a workshop. They decided to go and spend part of their lunch break walking to a little food stall, because they were in a bit of a funk. Let me go walk to a food stall, shake it up a little bit. They got a taco. Again, I'm not talking about big bucks to live a life that feels really cool. And oh, interesting. This is a new area. I've never been here. There was a little bit of sunshine, and I got out and I came back and I have a new lease on life to attack my afternoon. And those are small things where, again, we're not talking about doing the bucket list about you have to move to Paris and you have to divorce your deadbeat spouse and you have to, make these massive plans like change your career and go back to school. If you feel the urge to do those things, don't not do them. But for most of us, it's not about the grand sweeping gestures. For most of us, it's about deliberate little tiny things that we can pepper our days with that will add up to a life that feels more lived than one that just, again, was like a glossed over zombied version of the life that I think we all deep down really want to be living, more alive.
All right. Jodi, this is powerful stuff. Tell me any other do's and don'ts or things you want to mention before we hear about your favorite things.
Well, definitely the biggest do of all is do befriend the Grim Reaper. He will take your last breath away in the end. And so I understand the need to keep a distance, but he is absolutely the portal to living like we mean it. So do keep him close by being aware, count the Mondays. And I'm going to reiterate what I just said, don't underestimate that small things matter and pick one small thing to take action on. We know this through every business adage we've ever found, every to-do, every self-help to-do. It's like, don't try and take on the world. If you can blow your life up and start something. I know a client who said, I'm leaving my job. She's in New Jersey. She's like, I quit. I moved down south and I'm opening up an Etsy shop. That was a lot of life change in an instant. But for her, she needed to make a big signal to herself that it was like that. But for most of us, no. It's like, what is one thing you can do by the end of this week that is going to make you feel just a little more alive? Is it making a new playlist? Is it pulling out the spice drawer and being like, oh my gosh, when was the last time I used garam masala? Or is it calling your old friend from college and being like, dude, we keep talking about getting together. When are we going to, okay, October the 9th, booked. Do a thing that makes you feel like you voted to live. One small thing.
Big thanks to Jodi for sharing her wisdom with us. And big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. One sponsor to check out is the all-new Clean My Mac, your ultimate solution for Mac control and care. Clean My Mac is notarized by Apple and meticulously crafted by MacPaw, a leading Mac OS and iOS software development company. I have personally used and loved Clean My Mac for over a decade, and the new Clean My Mac has evolved beyond cleaning to overall care for your Mac. Clean My Mac has a sleek, user-friendly dashboard that quickly, beautifully lets me free up space, remove junk and malware, accelerate computer speed, and improve battery life. Whenever I run Clean My Mac, I genuinely feel a sense of refreshment, as though I had tidied up my desk or office, even though it's just my digital space that's being decluttered and I barely have to lift a finger. So get tidy with Clean My Mac your way. Clean My Mac is available for purchase on the MacPaw website, Mac App Store, and Set App. They offer a 7-day free trial, and you can use my promo code BEAWESOME, that's BEAWESOME, for 10% off any Clean My Mac subscription plan. One sponsor to check out is Jenny Kane. The holiday season is officially upon us, and Jenny Kane is a top destination for the very best of all things festive and gifting. They've got a handy gift guide that makes it oh so easy to check off everyone on your list. Jenny Kane has luxurious cashmere pieces, such as my all-time favorite hoodie that I am wearing right now as I record this, and tasteful homeware pieces, such as their legendary candles. Their coats are also super adorable and cozy and a great answer to the cold temperatures approaching. Finally, check out Jenny's Edits, which provides favorites under $250 and lists out handy gift-giving categories. For a limited time, How to Be Awesome at Your Job listeners get 15% off your first order when you use the code AWESOME15 at checkout. Now that's on top of their 10% rewards back rewards program. So to get 15% off your first order, visit JENNIKAYNE, JennyKane.com, and use the promo code AWESOME15 at checkout. All right. Now could you share a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
Oh my gosh. Hunter S. Thompson. Life should not be a journey to the grave in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, wow, what a ride. All
right. And a favorite study or experiment or bit of research?
I'm always a fan of the research that reinforces death reflection, helps us be more grateful. So not death awareness, which is just seeing a funeral procession go by. That does freak us out. But actually stopping and thinking, I have this many Mondays left, being thoughtful. And then what that does is it does make you more grateful for not just the experience of being alive, but for the good things in your life. So death reflection pays off in multitudes.
All right. And a favorite book?
I would say anything by Irv Yalom, Yalom. He is a psychologist that does really cool work staring at the sun is a really good example. And it's this idea about being willing to contemplate mortality.
Yeah. And a favorite tool?
I'm going to come back to count your Mondays and keep some sort of talisman nearby. It will be your reminder about your fabulous temporariness.
All right. And a favorite habit?
No habit. Remember, habits dull the edges of our existence.
I love the multiple perspectives here. And a key nugget you share that really seems to connect and resonate with folks. They quote it back to you often.
This idea that sometimes the fear of death is rivaled only by the fear of living.
And if folks want to learn more or get in touch, where'd you point them?
Thanks for asking. I'm over at 4000mondays.com.
And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
Yeah. Think about your legacy. How do you want to be described when you're long gone? Not just because you died. Maybe you got promoted. Maybe you got moved to the fancy office in the Southwest. Go do that. How do you want people to think of you when you're gone? Oh, and yes, at your funeral. And that is the reverse way to engineer a life that you love and that you are proud to be living.
All right. Jodi, thank you. This has been very, very fun. This has been aliveness boosting. I wish you 1,800 plus joyful Mondays.
I super appreciate it. Thanks for this time well spent.
Boy, this is one of the most powerful things I think you can really do, is to sit and think about your limited time on Earth. And what's so funny is it's so heavy and uncomfortable, I almost immediately want to start doing something else. So I really recommend taking Jodi at her word, booking some time to think about just this. How many Mondays do we have left? What is the implication of that? What might, in fact, be a regret if I continue going down this path, and just sitting with it? And because I find that just thinking about it idly as it crosses the mind doesn't cut the mustard. And it's really necessary to carve out a specific time and place to do this reflection. And boy, some powerful things can pop up. Great stuff from Jodi. If you want to hear a summary of her actionable wisdom in a write-up, please sign up for the Gold Nuggets at awesomeatyourjob.com, which also unlocks the vault of all 983 of these summary write-ups, the Gold Nuggets at awesomeatyourjob.com. And if you want to read the particular transcript and links to items that we referenced here in this episode, that's found at awesomeatyourjob.com/EP983. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.